So Melissa and I have split the cooking. Literally half and half Melissa, half me. So
well,
thank you.
And do you know what? I just think that it's a bit underrated, gratitude and food, and I think we should kind of reintroduce that.
Yeah.
I think we should think about that and think about what's gone into it. So thank you very, very much for that.
Thank you.
That's a pleasure. I think that we both have a real passion for cooking, love food, love cooking, and I hope that comes out in what you're eating, because I think too many people forget that you actually, imbue food with the energy that you've made it, really.
Yeah,
So
thank you. Yeah,
it's
definitely.
life-giving.
Well, it's
Yes.
the sharing of the wealth of life, isn't it? And you're not just hoarding it to yourself. You're saying everybody come and share.
I love that open table thing, as well, don't you? Which has been a dream about my city, which is Chichester, is actually feeding the city, is being able to feed the city as a sort of gift to the city, and I think we should kind of do more of that kind of thing. So just us little city today, but thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Well,
Thank you.
that also brings me into saying thank you so much for coming and sharing lunch with us. You're all really, really busy people. And so I know to carve out this much time is a big ask, and I'm incredibly grateful that you're here. So Melissa and I don't need any introduction, because our support base and our members know enough about us. But we have amazing guests around the table today, and just because I'm looking at you, no other order.
And I'm looking at the food, thinking I'm so hungry.
I actually think it's going to be nicer for you all to introduce yourselves. So, you've got all these tidbits and this wealth of experience and everything.
Yeah.
And can you tell us?
What, background?
Yeah, tell us the background.
So I'm Rohan, also known as Dr. Ro. I am 55 this year, going on 60, and I'm enjoying those years behind me. Grew up as a mix between half Sri Lankan, half Brahmi. My mum's from Birmingham. So actually, funnily enough, I know most of this is vegetarian. My father was a Buddhist and was very much in keeping with sort of natural, early, healthy eating. But sadly, suffered with problems with his health at a young age. Had a stroke at 27, another one at 29, paralysed at 36, multiple strokes, and then passed away at 46 in 1979. So I kind of grew up into a family where there was awareness of health and issues, and I was tested at a very young age because it was all to do with, is it hereditary, etc. So I was quite conscious at a young age of what we do with our lives and whether it was stress, etc. He had problems with his blood, but I came from a very Asian background. We're always taught, get a good education and you must study hard. So it was either engineering, optometry, accountancy, and I actually studied hard. I got my degree, my PhD in engineering, but at the age of 19, 20, I started reading a lot of personal development books. I think after my father died, I was searching for something. There was a bit of a gap going on, and I just read so much about human growth that I started at 20 going out in front of young audiences of teenage kids in schools and colleges, talking about communication, beliefs, values, and I think bringing a lot of stuff that I'd learned about myself to the table. So that was a parallel journey through becoming an engineer and studying really hard, and the passion took over in 1998 where I left my career and I started to teach people, and I've been doing that for a long time now. So the field of personal development, emotional development, spiritual development sort of came into play, which is quite different from being an engineer.
Did you do any engineering then?
I did for about nearly 10 years actually. I rose to the top of my profession, I won an award with the Institute of Civil Engineers and all of those things, but there was this huge tear in my heart, which was, I'm not what I'm qualified to do. It's like we meet each other and we say, what do you do? That's often the first thing we do when we meet people. It's like, who are you? Nobody ever says, who are you? Do we say, what is it you do?
Yeah.
And I kind of wrestled with that for a long time. And my mum was like, what are you doing? Because she wouldn't your father be so proud of you being this engineer? But there was something more inside me. So started several businesses to help create an income that allowed me to do what I wanted to do, which was to travel the world. And I've been privileged now. I think it's 25 different countries, audiences from 50 to 10,000. That's been an amazing journey. I wrote a book in 2011 called Turning Point, which is about not waiting for things to happen, but you create your own turning points. A lot of the work I did was with people that says, I found my husband in bed with this other woman, and that was the turning point. I knew the relationship was in trouble, and then I left him then, or somebody else got made redundant and they started their own business, and that was my turning point. I kept thinking, this term keeps coming up. And when I looked at it, everybody waits for stuff to happen, so it was about creating choices. So that's been the journey, and we crossed paths, I think, partly because of health.
We did,
and
mutual connections.
Yeah.
And then Rob and I have been.
You've been guests on our podcast.
We've been so grateful to be guests on your Cicado podcast and everything, which is amazing and has grown exponentially.
I think that's 20,000 downloads now, which hasn't been going that long. Father of two, 6-year-old and a 12-year-old. My fiance's Danish, and she's a bit younger than me. She's a massive health fan as well. But my mum got cancer about 23 years ago, and that changed us a lot with our diet, and we started to really take a look at this. And she came off meat and dairy and all those things, and they didn't have to do chemotherapy. I still vouch internally, and I say to people, I think that was a big change, because there was talk about lots of things they needed to do to her. But actually, apart from a tiny bit of surgery, she swung through in the year, and it's been an amazing journey since
that's
then.
wonderful.
And I wrote about it in the book, not to preach, but to say, look at what we eat. What if we can turn our internal? Because we're this walking pharmacy, aren't we?
Yeah,
You
we
know,
are.
so-
I know.
Well, this is what nature gives us as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
To help our bodies to access everything that we need.
I think that I was in a very, very busy career where everything was eat on the go. And so I found myself moving away from this stopping to prepare, being busy, and being almost forced, because sometimes my profession was civil engineering. We'd be on site at 5 in the morning, and you'd grab what you could. You had thousands of pounds worth of equipment there. Do I grab a snack now? And I had, part of the reason I left the career was because I had to prioritise my health. I saw my father pass away under a lot of stress, and I just thought, I'm not prepared to do that. So my whole value system completely changed. And I wrote about this in the book. It was like success was my number one value, and then that shifted to health. So what do I need to do to become healthy first, and then I'm successful after that. Anything I do after that is. So that was a big shift.
Wow. Yeah, health is wealth.
Health is wealth, and that's a big part
so
of
true,
you know. Our children aren't taught that food is information that informs
so
your genes and the way your genes express. I mean, if we really learned that from a young age, we would eat so differently, and we would take care of our bodies so differently.
Just the choices as well we make.
I think these days, though, the environment that people are in, you know, are such a pressure. The food environment, in effect, which when I was younger we never really had. Because I was brought up in the 60s and 70s, and you know, you just didn't have that access. You didn't have access to money really as a kid, so you kind of had to eat what your parents gave you. So there wasn't this access to shops and what's in the shop. Do you know what I mean?
Instant food. Which...
So I mean, people from my daughter's school, when she was they used to stop at Poundland to get their breakfast, literally, to stop to get the sweets. But the whole pressure is on them. The food environment, they just don't have that environment where they have the choice. And almost, you know, having a daughter, you know, obviously, who's just like, if I say to her, you know, do this, she just does the opposite. I'm hoping it's all going in, but you know, it's much more difficult, isn't it?
But they model us, don't they? So I think
hopefully.
Yeah, I do believe they do. I think, but there's certain levels of resistance. Like my 12-year-old's resisting a lot of stuff.
I think with teenagers, they are. You know, you just got to trust that everything is going in, and it will come back out. So, Kate, since I know just before you put that in your mouth, since
before you start eating.
So yes.
So this is Kate Cook.
That's me.
So Kate, please tell us about you.
Well, I'm a nutritional therapist like you. And so I trained in the last century.
That's a great way of putting it.
I did. Did you as well? Train in the last century? Not quite. Yeah, not quite. just under. But anyway, so and I have had a very busy clinic in Harley Street called the Nutrition Coach, and I was lucky enough at the beginning because it was really easy to get clients in those days, like shooting fish in a barrel, I'm afraid to say. So it was very easy because lots of people were writing books at that time. Nutritional therapy was really popular, but there weren't very many nutritional therapists. About 200 when I started off, 235 members of BANT.
What is it, like
one.
something crazy, over
Yeah,
50,000 now, isn't it?
Well, I don't know in the UK, but yeah, I mean, certainly we're a really growing profession now. So yeah, so I started off, I wrote quite a few books. I've written 8 books. I did a TV series in the 90s. And then I went into corporate. So I'm a corporate nutritionist. So it's teaching well-being in companies, really. So yeah, again, you know, I'm lucky to have spoken all over the world with that, and trying to make nutrition fun.
I know.
So it's trying to bring the silliness back into nutrition. And then actually I'm also studying anthropology of food, which is kind of a bit esoteric, but there you go. And so I suppose my sort of interest lies in the root causes of nutritional problems, looking right back into farming, you know, so not how it ends up in the shop. So, you know, that's one of my passions. Another one is community and cities. So bringing back, you know, taking out big data out of cities and taking out is all this sort of, you know, tracking people through big data. That's what people want to do in well-being, and actually bringing it back to a very local level. And as I was saying, you know, feeding cities, but feeding it through community. And not last but not least, I run the Nutrition Network, which is a network of about 3,500 nutritional therapists, and it's magic. It does magic in the Nutrition Network. Actually, it's really a good thing. Mainly because I have absolutely sort of nothing to do with it. My lovely manager Alison runs the whole thing. I think if I had something to do with it, I mean, I do all the sort of interviews and things, but it's really successful.
But it's community.
It's about
again,
community.
and it's about community.
Absolutely, it's about networking. Community is my big thing, I suppose. Yeah. So I think that's me.
Well, Kate, thank you. We're very lucky to have you. Jules.
Well, I'm feeling slightly, how shall I say, undereducated, perhaps.
Not absolutely not at all. We are so lucky that also that you're local.
So it is very local to me. I mean, we're talking 400 meters or so.
Oh, wow.
Direction, so I am very local. I guess possibly the best way to describe me is somebody who's gone through life never accepting the party line, never accepted what I've been told on first discussion, always question everything I've been told. And it's something that I've found over the years that has stood me in good stead. Never ever take the first answer. Ask why you're being told that. Who told you? Why did they tell you that? What was their evidence to prove that that was the right thing to do? And that's stood me in really good stead. And over the last 2 years of craziness, what I've found is that although I was upset, because I asked those questions and because I do go to the roots of things, even though I might not be happy with what I find, I'm finding out the truth. And so therefore you have closure on things. So I guess, although I've not written any books, and I don't run thousands of people, what I do is I run a software company. And the way that I run that software company, I would like to think is the most human way possible. What I've found over the years of working in corporate software companies is they want drones. They want to take your humanity away from you. And
So true.
when you see the unhappiness that people have to put up with, thinking that that's all that they're going to ever have in the corporate world, it really does. It's broken my heart on numerous occasions, and this is the reason why I started the business with the philosophy to do it in as human a way as possible. So people, my employees, come in at 9 o'clock and they are not allowed to stay after 5 o'clock. They have to go home. I do not allow them to stay any longer. If they phone up and they say, I don't feel like working today, take the day off. Sometimes it's just better you not turning up if you're not going to function in the way that you should do. And the communication that they have with one another, I'm trying to teach them how to do that in a human way. don't keep trying to remove the humanity from
Which is a challenge sometimes in software and sort of digital and computer kind of sides of things, isn't it?
It is, very much so. And actually, when we're, to the point that you were making just a short while ago, which was that we've headed towards this craziness of walking around with telephones that are our identity. I mean, that is madness in itself. To think that you can describe a human in a QR code on your phone, it fills me with dread, absolute dread, because a human is so much more than what is on a mobile phone. And so my sort of mission in life really is to try to use what I know about humanity, about us as humans living here, and trying to function in a software development company, trying to produce software that is designed to look after other humans in a way that we don't end up sort of running ourselves into the ground. And in some ways I have to take a little bit of responsibility, because back in the 80s and the 90s, I spent all my time designing mobile phone networks. The software that runs in base stations is probably some code that I wrote many, many years ago. But along the way, what I found was that I got more and more disturbed about what we were trying to achieve.
Right.
I'll give you a perfect example. I worked at Orange when they were doing the first versions of the location services. So where is that mobile phone? And a young lady got herself stuck on the side of a cliff. And we used this magic technology to find her and rescue her from the side of a cliff. At the time, I remember thinking to myself, you know what? I'm so glad we did that tech, because we found someone. But then you see what starts to happen, and what comes over as a great idea suddenly becomes perverted. And what we see all the time is all of these great ideas become perverted. And, it's not necessarily the fact that technology is bad.
Yeah,
It
exactly.
is really about the way that technology is put to use.
Well, I had to write an essay in my MA, and it was basically the topic was, it's not so much technology but who controls it. So
precisely.
that it was about actually GM food. So it was looking at how actually. But what's interesting about anthropology, it's not everybody's but what's interesting about anthropology is that it's looking, as opposed to sociology. Sociology is looking at big data, and anthropology is looking at stories, and I think that's what I love about anthropology. But it was looking about how this sort of almost the emergence of ground root, kind of swell of the ground root. It's quite individual, so you see this kind of in this it was GM, the pressure of GM and the pressure of being introduced into Africa and also into Mexico. And what you see is people just objecting to that, and actually they kind of, because they have local knowledge, they know how to actually kind of throw these people out, actually, if that's not what the community agrees with. So it's much more fluid than sometimes we see as this great big sort of pressures of big tech and all the rest, kind of pressuring, bearing down on us. Actually, it's about the fact that we are human and we have lots of little ways around things. And that really came, in other words, they were trying to control the technology, but actually humans being humans find a way around it.
We do, yes.
So,
precisely. And I think probably what I would bring personally to this table is the experience of having to work my way through all of these different things over the years to eventually find a way that I can teach others this methodology, but without teaching them, but by doing it by example. I hope that one day when the people who work for me will perhaps use what they've learned and think, no, I don't want to go down that route. I want to be more human about the way that I run a business, and not just do it for the money, because the money doesn't make you happy. But if you get in the morning and you can see that all the people that are working with you and for you are doing it with a smile on their face, that's worth it so much more, because those people, are happy. So
I think that's where we're so privileged with what we do at ANH, because we get up in the morning with a purpose and passion, and for us, yes, we work really hard, but we do it because it means so much to us, and it's about think reconnecting with our roots, with the natural world, with food, everything that we're talking about. We've lost those connections.
This is a great day at the office.
Yeah.
It is a brilliant
It is a good day at the
I'd
office.
like to say it's a typical day at the office.
Just say it is. Just say it is.
That's what we do every day.
We
isn't
wouldn't
it?
get any work done if we
No.
produced this every day.
I think it's a good
but-
point though, because I think a lot of people wake up in the morning and the only purpose is to pay their bills.
Yes.
Yeah.
They, you know,
Who
they're,
lights
they're,
them up?
they're just
Exactly.
fighting debt away, or they've got to clear the mortgage.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, there's this focus on a daily basis to survive, which means enjoying it.
Yeah, and then you're living in the wrong part of your brain, which you obviously know a
Yeah.
lot more about than me.
Well, it's
I mean,
survival,
from what
isn't
you
it?
do. Yeah, survival.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that's how people, over the past 18 months have been living in this, survival brain, not making good decisions,
Well,
it's
not having a
so-
choice, even being
Yeah.
told
No.
what to think.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
even
yeah.
more
Yeah.
scary, actually.
So so I'm sure it's so to do with how that purpose as you've got, and all of us have got purpose. I think that's so important.
Well, mission and purpose in life is one of the critical influences in having a long, healthy life, in longevity anyway. But thank you for your intros, because Jules, you set it up perfectly, because the reason why I really wanted to organise this today is that I know that we are only part way through what I like to think of as a major cleanup on the planet. And we have needed to do this cleanup for a really long time. And it looks like it's chaos out there, but actually there is a perfect, wonderful, natural order to what's happening. And you almost have to tear down the old before you can build the new. The new is going to be very community-based, it's going to be heart-centered, it's going to be very based on the fact that, we are humans and what do we as humans need. But one of the things I'm interested in hearing from all of you is that my own sense is that the way we achieve this in the best way possible is for each and every person to live their best life, to find their own happiness so that their resonance raises, to find what works for them. And in fact, what we have been asked to do, what we've been guilted, they've been trying to guilt us into doing things for others, takes you out of yourself, and suddenly you're being made responsible for others, which I have very strong feelings about. But how do you live your best life? How do you actually give yourself permission? And for somebody who's come from that survival place, each one of you, what do you feel is the best way of getting free of that?
Well, Jules probably knows a lot more about this than me, because this day,
On this day.
I'm going to wind back a bit, which is, I was just telling Jules that actually I saw this amazing video by Dr. Sam, what's her name?
Sam Bailey.
Sam Bailey, and she was interviewing this lady called Mary. Oh, I forget her name now. Anyway, this Mary had been basically, she's flying back to New Zealand, and she, because that's her country, and when she got there, she was detained in a quarantine place. And her truth was, her kind of position, her line in the sand was, I don't want to do the PCR test. Now, if she didn't agree to this PCR test, she was then detained, instead of for 5 days, she was detained, and I might have some of these details wrong, so correct me, so Mary, if you're out there, correct me, but basically she was then detained for about 24 days, part of it in solitary confinement. And anyway, the story she was telling, not whether people agree with that or disagree with that, whatever your position is on that, but it was the way she tackled it. And she basically, just listening to this lady, I was just like, oh my God, I would have bitten somebody at that point, you know what I mean? I would have actually just bitten somebody, I'd have been with the wrong, one of those films where you chuck off the plane because you've kind of attacked somebody with a gin and tonic or something. So she was just amazing. And so I wrote to this Mary, and I said, what was it you did? And she said, I did about 3 things, and one of them which was transcendental meditation. And I have tried meditation over the years, and I'm just rubbish at it. I'm a sort of failed meditator because...
You're already thinking ahead 2 steps.
Yes.
After this meditation, what do I need to do?
Yes. I'm like, 1 minute. Oh no! It's like hopeless. And so anyway, you know, TM is a little different, and as I say, I'm going today, so I will report in. But Jules, I think, knows a lot more about this than me. So that was the first thing she did, and there was several things she did. One of which was said, look at The Gift by Edith Eger, I think she's called, and The Choice, which are two amazing books actually. Just happen to have it with me somewhere, which is this. Hold on, The Gift. And so she's just said, because this poor lady was in a concentration camp under the Nazi period, and she just, in just a way that she came through that as well. So sort of practical
Turning point,
things.
right?
There's a big turning point for her. Yeah, so basically well, that's my sort of one thing to share now, and perhaps, you know, we'll come back to other things, but it was kind of like that realisation that you need to kind of be in your own power.
Yes, you need to go
yeah.
inside to...
Yeah,
Yes.
to because, you know, you can't be your best self in fear, and you can't influence. I don't mean to influence in a bad way, but you can't, as you were saying, you know, that transmission of you know, it's leadership. Actually, you can't do that if you are in a place that is not solid and grounded in that power. So that's what I'm hoping for my TM.
Thank you.
So that was my first little tip. So
Yes, I like that, definitely.
But Jules, you know a lot more about TM than me, don't you?
I think most of it comes from being taught remote viewing for quite a few years.
Yeah.
There are lots of different methodologies that are used to get yourself into a place where you can hear your subconscious. So many people they live here. The part anything further than their nose, they don't take any notice of. And what you start to do is when you start to meditate, transcendental meditation, what you start to realise is that when you quieten everything down, there's a still, calm voice that will help you. You're not here alone. You are actually being helped if you're prepared to listen. That's not something... I'll tell a good story from my one of my teachers called Laurie, and what she talks about is the fact that if you've spent your entire life just ignoring that voice and just ploughing on, what you'll find is that when you do start to communicate with that voice and you start to listen to what it tells you, it's like a little bit of a petulant response. It's like, oh, I'm here now, am I? Oh, you're prepared to listen to me. And it's a bit like what it becomes. And that's why when you go through this process of listening to your subconscious, listening to your inner self,
Because it sounds like you as well.
well, it's a different you.
But what I mean is that in your own head, it sounds like you, and so it's easy to discount in the beginning, isn't it?
It is.
And also the focus on mental health, you know, meaning it's not good to hear voices. You know, that thing which in other cultures, like Sri Lanka, for example, is very normal to hear voices,
absolutely.
actually, and accept that, as I gather from doing that anthropology I mentioned earlier.
But also, there's this fear of, is this the truth? Do I trust myself? Is that the real voice? Or because people have got confused over what is right and wrong. And I think they're starting to question their own truth.
Well, if you look at psychology, you know, psychology has worked on the principle, oh, you're hearing voices, have this drug.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Yeah. So
let's sedate you.
Yeah.
To anybody who's listening who is a good psychologist, I express my apologies, because there are some very good psychologists out there. However, what has happened with culture? Oh yes, please. These are really very, very nice. Very nice. By the way, I just want to say, I've been eating.
I know the flavours.
And this
feeding our
food
minds and our
is
stomachs.
just amazing.
Taste.
It's really good.
I'm glad.
But so much of what modern society wants you to do is to not connect with yourself, to follow what everybody else is doing. Do not question. Do exactly
numb
what
yourself.
your child. Numb yourself. And
Do you think that's about too many voices as well? Too many voices in that, you know, it's sort of like in the old. I always think of this as well. It's just like in the old days when there were lots of prophets and things like that. There was complete silence, radio silence, and I believe you will absolutely know this, but they're actually using different bandwidths now that have never been used before. So they're using to get the radio signals. I'm not talking about, you know, anything dodgy, but you know, they're using a different bandwidth of signal, so that even that silence is now being crowded out with voices. And I'm just wondering, if you were a prophet ages ago and you were able to tune into something, and with all this noise, how much of that voice would you hear? Is that a bit obscure?
Yeah. Well, I think there's noise at so many levels as well, aren't there? I mean, it's just from the very high frequencies down to just the constant what's going on around us.
Yeah, I mean, just a physical noise. I mean, we can see sort of gross noise, if you like. And
in fact, if you meant on a daily basis, who actually gets peace just on a general daily basis, unless you physically choose to go out or you meditate. But even in meditation, sometimes there's distractions, a car going by.
But with meditation, everyone can breathe. And you can use breath work as meditation. And you don't even have to go.
Your moment, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's your moment.
Yeah.
Because there's that pause between the in-breath and the out-breath. And that can take you everywhere.
Yeah.
And so it's what I always invite people is to just breathe. You know, 4 or 5 breaths a minute a day to just breathe. Yeah. Even if you just focus with your eyes open on nature, on a tree, on something, you will find a stillness and move into
and learn to tune out the physical noise that's out there as well.
Exactly.
I'm very sensitive to the cacophony that I can feel in other people's thoughts. I really struggle to be in London and to be in cities, and one of the reasons why I'm so thrilled with where we've got the office here is I don't know if you can tune into the piece that we're sitting in here, but there's headspace, and you have that where you live, and you're just down the road. I'm not sure where you are, but are you in town?
I am in the town. I mean, it's a lovely town, but and a very ancient one. But then I've got the South Downs behind me and the sea in front, so you can get that.
You've got nature around you, and that. The nature that's missing for so many people is that I would urge people to find it, go out, take a train even, go walking, just find nature around you.
And put the phone away, put the phone. I find that very difficult. I found this whole thing very challenging, I must say, mentally, because I'm somebody who questions absolutely everything, which is good and bad. I mean, it's Jules's point, which is if you're trying to work it all out, it's kind of like you're crowding your brain out with, meaning trying to get to the bottom of something that probably you cannot get to the bottom of, even if you knew. And even if you knew, what good would that do? So this is hence, I think, this absolute preparation for being very grounded, So, but what about your take on it?
I find at the moment people are struggling even to go to basic meditation. I mean, the breath I think is the closest you can get. Even that point where you go in and out on the breath is such a great focal point, isn't it?
It makes it easier. But you've done an awful lot for people in terms of communication and finding themselves and being able to find a voice. And I think that's. Can you talk a little bit about some of that work? Because I think so many people struggle to find their voice as well, to find themselves.
On a practical level, for people watching this, if the concept of meditation feels a bit too far to go, one of the best things is a piece of paper and just taking thoughts and just releasing them onto paper, literally. And I try and explain to people, if I'm doing any interventional work, that if you're going to focus on dark, you have to focus on the light. You can't have, it's the yin and yang of the world, isn't it? Otherwise, all you'll ever do is focus on what's dark, but you can't experience darkness without light. So that contrast is where I'll get people to say, okay, well, if we're in a bit of a dark place right now, why don't we just write down all the things you're grateful for? Let's just start with that, just capturing out of everything that's happened this last year, for example, what's come out of it that's been good? What are the great things? Because people will complain and moan about all the stuff that's negative. And gathering that on paper often sees a shift in their consciousness, maybe not as deep as a meditation, but they start to be aware of, okay, these are good things that have been happening. Yeah. And then you look at the darkness and say, okay, well, out of that, what I often get people to do is just to say, well, what have I got control over and what don't I have? There's some things we don't have. I mean, look at the polarity that's existed about masks, no masks, where you can go, where you can't go, walking down the street, people crossing the road because you haven't got a mask on or whatever. So people are walking around with all these fears. So what I'm finding working well with people is just to write down what they do feel they have control over versus what they don't have. And then starting to put some effort behind purpose. So the things that they're excited about. So it's almost, okay, what am I grateful for? Yes, there's all this darkness out there. Let me take what I can see that I have got control over, and let me start to put some effort and some purpose behind that, and try and tune out. And then often they're able to still themselves, and this is where we can move to meditation. But what I've been finding, a lot of people, they're still chattering along in their heads about. So taking it out and capturing it on paper is such a release. I've done it with people that have had physical, emotional, sexual abuse, and when they write it down. Actually, just talking to somebody yesterday, she was multiple abuses through her youth, and the conversation was around what are the strengths that you've gained as a result of these experiences, because otherwise all you're ever going to do is focus on the pain. And actually a lot of independence, a lot of ability to spot things that are coming from the world that might be threatening, and a lot of good strength there as well. So I think we often forget to look at what's good in the darkness as well.
Because also when you can see in the darkness and you can acknowledge it, you release it.
Right.
And when we release our shadow, it leaves you to move to a much more positive place. But then what all of you are describing as well is about frequency change, isn't it? Because you know what it feels like. I mean, everything comes down to frequency at the end of the day. And whether if you're in that really low place,
and you can feel it.
You can feel it. You're down.
Yeah.
You're totally down. Everything's down, and then life is crap, isn't it? You know, you seem to attract all kinds of things, and it all just spins off that. The minute you get into appreciation, you change your resonance, you change your frequency, everything changes. Yeah. And I think that was the point, is that we are going to navigate what's coming for us so much better if we can live our best life and be in a higher frequency, because then we have this ability to affect everyone around us as well.
Well, actually, another magic thing, and I don't know if anybody's got experience of this or similar, is for me is Qigong.
Yes.
Which I just love, and it's very easy to do, and you don't have to be kind of like Tai Chi. I used to have a Tai Chi teacher. I did Tai Chi for about 3 weeks, and the bloke used to walk.
I thought you said 3 years.
3 years. He used to walk around with a stick and whack you. If you're I'm sure that's not a typical Tai Chi experience.
Talk about pain and pleasure.
No, he just got. And that's it, you know, so because you couldn't get that ball thing right, you know, and I'm sure there's lots of Tai Chi people that do it perfectly, and it's not their experience of it.
I can imagine your reaction.
3 weeks.
I'm amazed you didn't bring a stick with you.
Yeah, exactly. But then I discovered Qigong, because Qigong is kind of like being absolutely grounded, and it's sometimes, if people tend to be in their heads a lot, this is about solidly in your power, just like. And what happens is, it's like actually, you know, and I've used this on various people quite near and dear to me, quite close to me, my husband. But basically, you know, doing Tai Chi and just going, you know, and going, and he just doesn't, you know, just like he goes, okay, well, I'll just do it another way then. Well, like, thanks. You know, it's this very calm sort of just, you know what, this is my space, but also it transmits, I don't know if this is right, it sort of transmits that to other people.
I agree with you. I think it does. Totally. Even you doing that, there's almost like this layer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
as soon as you do it.
I felt the change, and I was thinking to myself, do you actually put your hands up, or do you do it in your mind?
I do it in my mind. Yeah, I just do it in my mind.
But
even the
makes
hands
a
works actually. When I'm
Yeah.
training up new speakers and they get very nervous about going to stage, I just say, as you walk up there, just imagine that you're creating a bubble around you, and whatever your shield is, just to protect you, but it feels safe.
But I think
you can
it's
take a lot
real.
on when you're around people as well.
Well, exactly that. And I think with this whole thing, you know, and especially if you're quite head-based, as I am, you know, I'm quite academic, you know, in the sense that, you know, I have to read 50 papers on something, and you know, I try and work it all out, but you just can't work it all out, and it's just also just to realise that this doesn't do you good if you're sitting all the way up in your head all the time. You have to just be embodied. So that's another good tip is the Tai Chi, not Tai Chi.
Qigong. Not Tai Chi with a stick anyway.
No, not people.
If this fails, you get a stick out.
Yeah, and then you whack it. Yeah, exactly. It's like, what? No, I didn't work. Now, right now.
I was given a piece of advice many years ago, and I held on to it for all of those years, and it's still true today and very pertinent, I think, today, and that is to change the things that are within your control Everything else that's outside of your control, in the same way that you just said, Kate, you have to let it go, because you can't change it, you can't affect it, but everything that's within your remit to change, you can make that decision to change it or to control it or what you do with it. Sometimes it can only be very small things like what you eat, for instance, but a small change can actually be a very powerful change, and lots of little changes, as I always say to my clients, lots of small changes actually add up to a great big change when you look back over it.
It's that 1 degree change now that over time, as opposed to suddenly a 90 degree bend.
Yeah, because if you say to somebody, right, you're going to change your way of eating and you're going to eat like this every day, then it's too much. But if you say, right, this week you're going to have one extra vegetable, and next week you're going to have another extra vegetable, and you're adding on, as you say, the little 1 degree things, all of a sudden you are eating like this, but you don't realise it. It happens.
It's a corny thing to say, it's a journey. Well,
but
it's true. It really is.
Sorry to cut across you. What's also really interesting about that is when you start doing that, is how others observe you whilst you do that.
Yes.
It's been
very true.
When you make that change, and someone sees you make that change, that gives them the courage to think, well, if you've made that change, then I can do the same thing. And if you're doing it, like you say, with small angles, just deflecting very slightly away from what you were before, you have a chance to maintain it. As you were saying, is if you go off at 90 degrees, there's a very strong possibility you're going to be straight back because it's too much. But you do it just a little bit by time, and eventually the deviation from the norm becomes massive.
And you can't go back.
Firstly, you can't go back, but you don't want to go back because you can see the difference. And the reason why it was quite pertinent was my partner's daughter. She's gone through this whole thing. She's 12. But what I've really noticed with her is that she's taken a really close eye on what she eats. Because we've always been healthy. Well, I'm vegetarian. My my partner is very focused on food and eating healthily. We've not said anything. We've just continued to be healthy. And something I looked at her the other day, and I just realised when she was standing next to some of her friends, she glows. She goes glow about her because she decided what she was going to do.
Yeah, it was her choice.
It was her choice. And now, there's nothing you could do to wave a chocolate bar under her nose and go, you want this? You go, no, because I know what I want. I want to be healthy. I want to follow my path. And I think a really strong message to everybody is always, if you do make those very small changes, it's not just you who's benefiting, it's everyone around you is benefiting. And you don't have to make really big things, you can just keep making small changes.
But I'm interested to hear from both of you actually, how you think, because I suppose people listening as well might be thinking, well, yeah, that's all very good. As we all believe you should change yourself, as I've just said. But that's going to be a long, long time before everybody makes that change. Do you think actually that could be quite, therefore, in effect, it starts a momentum and it's quite quick? Or do you think actually, gosh, we're talking centuries here?
That's a great question. Well, my experience has been when you start the change, as you said, other people around you, people observe. And it's the law of attraction, isn't it? You tend to attract people to you that are more in alignment with who you are. And the ones that aren't so aligned, that's the tough one, is making a decision. Do I want to stay in that space and hang out with those people? Sometimes their family will wake up with them or whatever. Versus my experience has been over the years, just each change I found new people have come into my life, and you tune more and more into that. I mean, looking today is an example of that. I think it happens quicker on a macro level. On a global level, I think we're talking a long time, personally. But there will be a tipping point. It's just, if we keep thinking, how do we shift the world, as opposed to shifting our own small community, enough small communities suddenly start to make
making the shift within first.
Exactly.
And just imagine if everyone did that. I know.
It's happening in pockets all over the world right now.
The invitation to expand consciousness is massive at the moment,
Yeah.
and many people are answering that call, and other people they're feeling a pull to certain things. They're feeling the need for change. They're wanting to do different things. And all I would say to anyone watching is, please answer that voice and follow the call within.
Yeah, don't wait.
Don't wait.
To get to our age. There's a lot of younger people actually want. I mean, you know this from our podcast.
Yes.
Lots of young people wanting it.
Yes.
But there's still that social. Is it the right thing to do right now?
But they're
your
the
concept of a new
future
business is
leaders of
amazing.
the world,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So they need to be making
It
that
might be an
change.
interesting energy shift, as you were alluding to there, because before
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 there was life,
Back in
and then
the-
there is
When God was a lad.
and then there is
but it's interesting because I think everybody was so kind of like, actually there's God, why am I talking about anthropology so much? There's this guy called Erickson who wrote a book called, I think it's called Overheated, and it was literally about the overheating of culture. And everybody's rushing so fast. People are whizzing around on planes. They're doing everything. It's all sort of speeding up. And I don't know if you predicted it, but I mean, interesting concept that basically it kind of burnt itself out with a big bang. But it's interesting because I think a lot of people with this have actually looked and said, okay, well, actually, like with me actually looking much more into the spiritual thing, because I've always looked. I mean, I've been a very head-based person previously. So it's much more, about finding my tribe and about actually having the courage to find my tribe and the courage to be what I think is right. I'm always right, obviously, but the courage to be, courage to think you're right, and the courage to hold your line, the courage to hold your line in the sand and just say, this is actually where my line is. And I think I found that courage in this whole thing actually, is to really say, this is me, and actually I've looked into it. And this is where I think the line of the sand is. So I think that's been a very important lesson in this whole thing. And for other people listening, it's just to know where that line is.
It's a very healthy line. Sorry, Melissa, because to hold your own authority. And I'm a great one for always talking about sovereignty, because people haven't really understood the concept of sovereignty necessarily. But now we need to be that more than ever, because to hold the line, to listen to the voice within, to hold your own authority, and actually to have the confidence to run things through that authority, and if it doesn't resonate, to be able to actually say no, thank you.
Yes.
It's the courage to not belong necessarily.
Yes, and it does feel very awkward, because if you feel like you're the, especially as we're such social animals, to feel like you're the person who is being a bit awkward, or being the person who actually is saying a bit awkward. What?
I know.
But it's just sort of just holding that, and
Which is okay as well. It's okay to be aware of that.
Yeah.
Because you've got a stick in your hand. So
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's the other challenge, is that we're in a society now where if you are different and you don't cut your hair for many years, whatever, all of a sudden you stand out.
Yes.
What's wrong with that? Who gives a, I mean, this is who I am. I think we've lost that. Because that uniqueness, I mean, it's all about schools, but there's so much conformity, which you have to break with your company if somebody will come through the door. It's like getting them to think differently.
So you were about to say something.
I was just going to go, Ro, you said about losing people in your life or things changing, and I think it's been a very interesting time the last 18 months, with so many shifts and lots of gaps and people moving in different directions. And again, it's something that I've had for a very long time, but it's the concept that people come into your life at different times. So the people that are in your life for a lifetime are very few and far between, and are very, very precious. But people also come into your life for reasons. So they're there for a moment and then they're gone. And they stand out in your memory and in your life, and they're a turning point often, very often. And sometimes they come in for a season, so they're there with you for quite a long time. They're there, but they're there for a purpose. And then you diverge and take different pathways. And we're very scared for people to move away from us, or for us to move away from people more and more these days. And I've held that particular concept close for a long time, because it reminds me that
So you're sort of letting go of people at various different stages on the road.
Yeah,
Is that what
because
you mean?
it's a natural evolution. It's a natural process. And if we have that awareness, we can go, okay, I'm really sad that this person is not in my life anymore, but they need to go and do what they've done, and they've brought all these wonderful things to me.
Yeah.
And it's just the natural course of life, of our journey, for want of a better word.
And many people
Bilbo
are going
Baggins on that one, actually, aren't you? Sort of Bilbo Baggins sitting in his little hobbit hole or wherever he was, and then actually it takes pretty brave. I am basically Bilbo Baggins, except I don't have hairy feet. You know, sitting by the fire and being very comfortable sitting by the fire, but having the courage to be winkled out of your hobbit hole. You know, you're the Shires, and being forced to go on a journey that you really don't want to be forced on. But what I was thinking of, what you were saying, is all those people that he meets along the way, and that he has to, you know, in effect, obviously it's an allegory for something or other, but you know, that's that, and then letting go of those people, and in fact actually people dying along the way, you know, so letting go of those people. So everybody has to be a Bilbo Baggins who's brave and courageous.
I would say that is the definition of the deepest love, because if for you to truly say that you love and care for somebody is to celebrate them doing what is right for them.
Yeah.
I think there is a little bit there is a bit of a malaise in society where they think that loving someone means that they should stop whatever they are doing in order for them to do something for someone else. Now that's not to say there are times in our lives where we do choose to give up some of our life for someone else, but that's your choice.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
There is a lot of restrictions placed on people that make them think that that's love. But actually, to me, the deepest form of love is to say to somebody, I love you so much, and it will be upsetting when you go, but I love you more for what you are going to do when you leave and what the other people are going to experience.
Yeah,
and I want them to experience you in whatever form that you take as you move forward in your life. And you see a lot of that. You see, what are the most unhappy people? The people that have not chosen to follow the path.
Right.
That they know deep down in here is what they do. And going back to what you were talking about, so many times you can go back to those root points. I decided to allow somebody else to take control of my life. And suddenly you look at that and you say, that was the root point. In which it all went wrong.
It's very difficult to spot, though, isn't it?
It can come in some very, very nice outfits and sparkly hats. You know, it looks great at the time, and then suddenly, hang on a minute, I've dug myself a big hole here. Suddenly, pride starts coming in because suddenly I'm too proud to admit that I was wrong or to correct those mistakes, and it's too much of a deviation to go back and understand what I should have done.
Well, that's back to you, isn't it, about communication, isn't it? Because that must be a very important, that dance that people kind of might do in their lives. I mean, I'm not saying should do, but that, you know, instead of reaching the cliff edge and thinking, you know, blimey, O'Reilly, I can't do this anymore with this particular person. I must shed them off the journey because that's too shocking and abrupt, isn't it?
Yeah. A lot of it as well is that point where if I'm holding on to this, what am I holding on to it for? Is it for my benefit or is it for theirs? And most of the time it's driven by our own ego, isn't it? It's this need to feel safe, that fundamental, that triangle of the pyramid of like security. And I think that communication that goes on internally often is an internal wrestle with who am I? I actually think this year and the next couple of years are a great chance for people to reset and actually go, right, let's reset the compass.
It's true.
What's my identity? What is it I actually... Who do I stand for? What do I stand for?
I think too many people still look outside to find out who they are.
Exactly.
Instead of going within. Yeah. And
this year's stopped all that because their identity's been a bit fractured by a world that's disjointed.
And of course now there is so much division, and the division on the planet is almost enhancing the shadow on the planet. And even if you've made other choices to the people around you, if you can actually stand in your sovereignty, you naturally have a more open heart with more empathy and more compassion, so that you then don't hold those people as wrong, you know, because everyone is expressing their choices. And that for me is a very important thing, is that if someone makes a different choice to you, have the empathy and compassion to allow them to walk that path.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't mean that you're going to walk the same
You
path.
can't be the person who's then sort of holding somebody else's feet to the fire for the choices they've decided
No.
to make.
Yeah,
So
No.
it's not a right or wrong. I think the interesting thing about this whole thing really as well has been this sort of difference in sometimes, because we never talk about politics, and don't worry, I'm not going to, but it's the sort of left and right agenda sort of thing, which is maybe this polarisation. But actually what we've found is brothers and sisters who actually hold a bigger view of humanity, and there is no left and right. In effect, it's actually people who you probably wouldn't have gone into bed with before, if you know what I mean, in terms of views.
Yeah.
People who hold very radically different views,
Agreed.
but actually being able to see that they have a point. I think that's been a great gift for me personally in this whole thing, and actually going, gosh, I would have never listened to that podcast before, but actually, okay, I don't agree on some things, but do you know what? Actually, they hold a common humanity that I can see. Is that your experience?
Yeah, I think for anyone watching that's having pain, a lot of it is because there's a wrestle as well between these polarities. Like you talk about brother and sister, but even in families at the moment, there's differences in views.
Yeah.
And a lot of what I've noticed this year is people dispensing energy just on wanting to be right. This is my opinion. Why doesn't my brother or my sister or my auntie or my uncle? Why not just let that go?
Yeah.
That experience can be like a passing moment. If
Be
you just
okay with it.
be okay with it. Yeah, be at
And
peace
just
with it.
just be at peace with it, because you don't know what's going to
Because
happen.
what does it serve you to wrestle with it? For
I think
months?
that's the line
I know
in the
people have
sand
fallen
thing.
out, and families that
Yeah.
just fractured
Yeah,
because of their
yeah.
different views over this last 12
But
months.
it's knowing where you are. I think that's where, I mean, because, early on in the
Starts
whole
in here.
thing,
It does.
because also, as I say, I was really trying to work everything out and reading so much and double checking my sources and making sure, do you know what I mean? I've got the reference studies and all the rest of it, that's you with me, totally. And then actually it just falling on completely deaf ears. I said, it's almost like being someone like, who's that bloke? Noah, standing, by the ark and going, it's going to rain. They go, boo. You go, no, really. I know, but the kaftan's nice, but honestly, it's gonna rain. Oh, yeah, right. So that's who I felt. I felt like Noah standing there and everybody just flicking me peace signs. But anyway, I don't want to be right because it did rain, right? But I mean, that feeling of trying to convince people to your view and actually, what people, you have to give that compassion. That's another big theme, isn't it, really? About just going, okay, don't hold my view.
But even that comment is so valid. It's like trying to get people to see my view. Anything you push against, naturally, the universe pushes back, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, absolutely.
Found that one out.
It's funny that you start looking at the way things have changed just in the last year or so. How many people knew about cancel culture 2 years ago?
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
no.
Nobody.
Yeah.
But now it's
But now
common parlance.
it is common parlance. Even if you turn on the brainwashing from the news channels, they're already talking about hate speak, cancelling people, so on and so forth. That person isn't allowed to speak. This polarization just drives more and more fear and more distinction between people. I can't be friends with you because you have a different opinion to me.
Yes.
Now, I don't know if anybody remembers, something really bad happened in Germany sort of about 80, 90 years ago.
Yeah.
Burning books,
Right.
cancelling people,
Exactly. Yeah.
But it's been a
marginalising
very,
people.
Yeah.
Discrimination.
And then getting to the point where that person can't walk around unless they've got a piece of paper in their pocket.
Right.
You start hearing the echoes of the past coming
But
forward
it's quite
again.
a common theme in history, isn't it? I mean, the sort of cancel culture in effect. I mean, it's obviously to do with power dynamics, where one religion's right, one religion's wrong. It's really quite a common thing. And what is it with humans? Is it a tribal thing where, look, you're in my gang, you're not in my gang? It's sort of, I'm thinking Genghis Khan or somebody, there's a brilliant book about Genghis Khan, by the way, but, galloping across the plains and just kind of like having to consume everything and then having to make these cultures that he absorbed into, in effect, Mongolian culture, having to make them into, or merging the cultures and making them kind of the same culture. Do you see what I mean? Having to eradicate difference.
We have to homogenise.
What is that? Homogenize. That's the word for it.
But you see, you brought us right back. So I mean, if we all stood in our sovereignty and were in our power, raised our own frequencies because we lived our best lives, and we then accepted everyone else doing the same thing, look how quickly we would change the paradigm.
Yeah.
The whole human collective
That's when you would get
would
around-
shift. It
Back
would
to
just
your question.
But actually another practical
Unstoppable.
thing
Yes,
you could
absolutely.
do, which is what we did in our city, is we used to have a gala in Chichester, which was we used to dispense cornflowers, which was a sign of friendship. So we reintroduced. In fact, unfortunately, there was lockdown, so it kind of went. But we introduced having cornflowers as an emblem to wear, for people to say hello to each other. So if you're wearing the cornflower, people say, "Oh, hi, how are you?" And so it was a way.
But isn't it sad that
Yeah.
we've got to that point that you need a cornflower to do
right.
that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Because people were masked, you see, so people didn't see the smile behind
Right.
that, and people also sort of, and so the
There's a
cornflower
whole
meeting
conversation
says,
even around that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
But the lack of smile.
No,
Sorry.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Even you saying that's so true.
So it was,
Yeah.
and also bringing back that compassion, which is, just because, that's, obviously probably outside is probably not a good thing in any respects, but that sort of way that actually the most important thing is the human connection, rather than the fear of anything. So, just anybody who lives out, in their own cities, to introduce a way where people start to reconnect and actually start to listen to each other, and you may have radically different views, but just being able to have that conversation and not be right,
Exactly.
actually.
But it's actually community is the key element of this. We've seen
True.
we've seen the destruction of community over the last 20, 30 years, and it's dug really deep into people, and it creates a fear of that reconnection.
Yeah.
Yes.
So many people are in fear now of actually, should I walk on the same side of the pavement
Exactly.
as my neighbour? Am I? What is my social responsibility for you? You can hear them saying it in their heads as they're
And-
walking towards you.
And I'm saying nothing.
You-
My
good.
responsibility
Good.
is me.
You just rock on. It becomes a constant limiting factor for people to reconnect because all of this has been placed. You've been given the responsibility for my health. You've been given the responsibility for my health. Suddenly my responsibility for my health is now belonging to everybody else, not my own.
Yeah.
This has tipped the whole thing. It's once again, it's an
So eat what
inversion.
you like.
It's an inversion.
Eat what you like.
Yeah.
Because
20 hamburgers and the buns and all the chips.
Actually,
Come on, because
But
it's our
Jules-
problem.
yeah, exactly.
But Jules, the more sinister side of that is that, as you well know from all your remote viewing and your everything else, is that if you do that, and if you then keep taking people outside of themselves and making them responsible outside, they are not able to stand in sovereign authority.
Absolutely.
You can't do that, so you can't find your own power. And I would implore people watching to still find your power no matter what is happening around you, what directives are coming out, because we are free in our minds and we can make our own choices.
And I think it starts with, not, if you hear a voice, don't question, go back to the
Yes.
meditation.
Yes.
Just okay, there it is. Try and turn the volume up a
Yeah.
little bit, listen to it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because everything else is tuning it down, or
Absolutely.
frowns, or something, and you go mute it, put it back in a box.
Yeah. Hide it away.
Lots of
Hide it
people
away,
do
yeah.
hear voices, actually. I mean, and I think it's been very shunned, that kind of, actually really hearing, a voice.
Mine is
I've
goose,
had that.
so I'm getting it now
Yeah.
as we're talking.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
that, when there's a real resonance,
You
straight
feel
away
it.
I just get these
Yeah.
goosebumps happening.
Yeah.
But that's the voice speaking to you as well.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
your guide.
It's its
You
way of-
get
yeah.
that too. So
I do a lot,
Yeah.
a huge amount. But all of this, I think the other thing that we forget, or we rely on other people to make ourselves happy these
So
days.
true.
And actually, everything that you've said really reminds me that actually, to be happy, I have to be happy in myself. And the only person that can make me happy is me.
Is you, yeah.
Anyone else that comes into my life that then can add to that is great, but it has to be a separate thing, if that makes sense. You know, if I'm not happy in me, somebody can't come into my life
And make you
and
happy.
make me happy.
No.
No, exactly.
So everything that we've discussed, you have to have that inside yourself, and then you can invite other people in who will share that and enhance it.
If anybody's watching, they're like, but how do I know? One fascinating thing with happiness is, I used to do a lot of work where I'd ask people, how do you know if you're happy? I'd get a pen and paper, and it'd be like a set of rules. In order for me to be happy, what has to happen? Oh, my husband has to text me at the end of the day to tell me he loves me. My kids have to do this. And all of a sudden, you could see there's always external things.
Yeah.
If this happens
Yes.
and this happens, then I'm happy.
Yeah.
So when we sort of changed the rules around happiness and said, okay, what about if it's something you wake up in the morning, take a deep breath, I'm happy. Oh yeah, that's a good point. And you change those rules and relax
that's
them
interesting.
so that it's not and they have to do this.
Because
and
all the
my-
time you're disappointed, aren't
Right.
you? Because you're going like, you didn't
So
text me, so
if you just
therefore
have
Exactly.
control
happy.
over it, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah,
happy
yeah.
if I walk along the street, I can smile at somebody.
Mm.
And when people rewire their rules around happiness, actually, I find they just relax a lot better.
Yeah.
and
That's
better.
it's very true.
Yeah.
Really, really,
I
really
think,
true.
and I think the other thing is, which we've always sort of generally sort of talking on the theme of that kind of your own kind of sovereignty, to your point, is also, I mean, that seems a sort of bit deep really, but we're only here for a really short time. This isn't it. This isn't it. But this may not be it, A. And B, you know, we're just a shadow on a you know, a flitting shadow as we whiz past on a train. You know, that's what we are.
Yeah.
And actually, it's to get it in proportion, to say, actually, okay, it's our moment, but let go of that moment, and actually, do you know what? It's okay. It'll be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever
All
happens,
things pass.
it'll
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah.
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 And I think these days, with that sort of fear of, in effect, we've been, or some people have been so, what do you call it, preoccupied with, you know, in effect, death or security or kind of like illness, that we just can't stop that, you know, and whatever, you know what I mean. We can't be like King Canute and be holding the tide back. It's just like actually just to let go of that. Hold the line in the sand, whatever that might mean for you. Hold your sovereignty, and actually just. I'm talking this. It sounds like I know what I'm doing, but I haven't got a clue actually. So just in case.
But you're dancing with it.
Yeah, I'm
You're
dancing with
you're
it.
dancing
You're
with
making
it.
perfect sense.
That's,
Yeah.
I think that'd be a nice mix.
So
of
that's
both.
where we're trying to head, and I think that's the thing, which is none of us got it sussed. We just have to.
But actually, even the
work
word
towards it.
dance is great. A lot of people talk about this battle they're having. But if you just shift the wording you use around experience, I'm dancing with it rather than fighting it. It
It's
has a
like dancing
completely
in the
different
rain,
fundamental.
isn't
Yeah.
it?
I don't know, finally.
And you only ever get a rainbow when you have the rain.
Right.
Exactly.
So, and the
Yeah.
rainbow
Just a
shows
little-
you
yeah.
that the rain has
Just a little bit.
passed.
Just a
So
little bit.
there's
This
so
is-
many metaphors, I suppose, aren't there? That,
Although,
so
in a-
you can change that focus.
I was going to say, many years ago, I came to the conclusion that when you have those negative elements to your life starting to happen to you, so many people make it almost worse by saying, oh, then this happened, and then that happened, and then this happened, and oh my God, I can't possibly dig my way out of that. Well, what I've always, the kind of, in fact, I even had it tattooed on my wrist to remind me that sometimes those negatives will create a positive that you can then use. So don't just sit there and think, oh, look at all these bad things that have happened. Actually think, well, there's a couple of bad things that I can turn around to something that I've learnt something,
Yeah.
and I'm going to make it positive. And there are so many negative things that get fed to us on a day-to-day basis, but
Continuously.
continuously, and we get drawn down into that, and our vibrational energy goes lower and lower, and it's that balance. Suddenly, we then are starting. Our positive energy is being drawn into these negative thoughts. Sometimes you have to say, okay, now that I've realised those things are negative, I'm going to make them positive, because next time I hear those, I will know they're negative, and I can have a defence against them. So we are surrounded by negative energy all of the time.
But we don't grow through positivity.
No.
you
You're
have
right.
to
So
have the
you
balance.
have to have
Exactly.
the balance. So,
Exactly.
Yeah.
so that
Goes
anything
back
like
to
that
the
is a
yin,
gift,
yeah.
because
Yeah.
you know, when life is trucking along perfectly and
Yeah.
you're happy as Larry,
Yeah.
think about when
It's
you
easy
first
to
fall
be
in
positive
love.
when it's like that.
You don't
Yeah.
grow, nothing moves, nothing changes.
Yeah.
But the minute that, you know, the train falls off the tracks,
Yeah.
suddenly you make a huge conscious
consciousness
shift.
you have to make a conscious shift,
Yeah.
don't you? Which is quite
And I think what
interesting.
you're saying, Jules, I mean, there's a great quote years ago, and it's always stuck with, was it Deepak Chopra? You have to be a silent witness to the moment.
I do love him.
And I think his whole concept of that really struck me when I first heard it. Is what you're
That's
saying.
where
Is,
it came from.
so just stop in that moment and
Yeah.
have a look at it. Just float out,
Yeah.
take a look at it.
Yeah.
This person and I just passed, and we don't beat ourselves up.
Well, it's interesting because the
Be aware
Hobbit
of it.
analogy, which is is about there you are in the Shires and
With hairy
actually- with hairy feet, burning them, singeing them by the fire, and waiting for your courage to come. But actually, away in the mountains is all this stuff happening.
Right.
In other words, at the same moment,
Yeah.
that's still happening.
Instantaneous.
But
yeah.
actually, if you're in the Shires and you're tuned out sitting by the fire, then actually it doesn't exist, if you know what I mean. So actually, it's really where you're looking and where you are of what it is that might be affecting you negatively.
true.
Does that
Yeah.
does that sound
absolutely.
completely?
And this, while we're sitting here,
Yeah.
somebody's probably been born.
Yeah.
Another person's just passed away. It's just
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah. But
And
it's
that-
it's
and
being
whilst we're
here.
here-
Continuum
Yeah.
of life.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
And
think
that
that's
is
right.
the most perfect segue, probably into dessert.
Oh.
After a happy
Sounds
meal.
good.
So here we are, dessert time. It's sometimes the time of day that everybody's looking for in a meal, isn't it? And I just wanted to say that you can see that you can still have a healthy dessert, and it's not boring. And I'm interested in your feedback because this is it's a totally non-dairy,
Yeah.
non-cheese cheesecake. So with
So how's
coconut
it
with
done?
coconut yogurt,
Mhm.
and then we've got lovely cacao keto balls, and we're going to be releasing the menu along with all of this so people can have a look at what we were eating. But the point about what we were eating is that it's all homemade, it's all easily accessible nutrients, loaded with colour and phytonutrients before the secondary plant chemicals that power your immune system. And powering our immune system is really quite important at the moment, particularly as we go into winter here in the UK. Having a wealth of colour in what you're eating. We've had a wealth of all of nature's 6 colours with all of the information that gives our genes. And so now please enjoy your dessert.
Yes, wow. Thank
you very much.
you.
And while we have dessert, it seems fitting that we have some closing thoughts about how one can best navigate what is to come. Because what is to come, I think, is highly, I think everyone can agree that we probably have not seen the worst. And rather than seeing many of our freedoms returned to us, I think we're probably likely to see a lot more restriction in our freedoms, which is going to take a lot more inner strength and inner resources to be able to traverse well.
I agree.
So I would love to hear your thoughts on how to navigate what's coming.
What about a top 3?
Top 3 sounds great. You're going to kick us off, Kate?
Well, yeah, as you notice, I'm quite bossy, so I'm going to, I'll start off. Right, top 3, top of my head. Well, definitely well, I'm a nutritionist, so let's start off with diet. I mean, to our point, really, is to stay metabolically flexible. There's plenty of information about all of that. I'm not going to go into that, but on your website, presumably, where can they find that?
They're going to find it on the website.
On your website, yeah.
All the information is in the Food for Health campaign.
Exactly.
But this particular menu with all the recipes will be along with this video.
Yeah, so that's the first foundation, I think, is just to get that right. And the second, I think, is along the lines I was saying about, not everybody can meditate, absolutely. I'm going to let you know how the TM goes as I do my first lesson tonight, but also that Qigong has been very powerful. So finding some kind of stillness methodology. And number 3, I think it is just, like being with family and being in your own. We were talking about the Hobbit earlier and being in the Shires and in your own Hobbit house and actually looking after those around you and spreading that love to people near and dear to you. I think that's the thing, is to concentrate love where you can share it easily. That
Wonderful.
would be my top 3, I think.
Wonderful, thank you.
Oh, gosh. How do I improve on what Kate's just said? 100% echo everything. Support your immune system. That's going to be key for everybody going into the winter months in the UK, but probably around the world as well. Your immune system is so important regardless. Find your happiness inside yourself. And that can be lots of little small things. It can be big things. For me, seeing a beautiful flower is something that makes me happy. So that's a tick per day. So even if you find one thing a day, it's wonderful. And stay centered and stay true to yourself. Whatever your being is, wherever you are, whatever you think, you need to stay true to yourself.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm going to pick a few out of the process that I take people from Turning Point, which I think would be really useful. I'm going to do it in reverse, and that is to start with a sense of purpose. So for people that are watching this, I think it's a great chance, particularly at the moment while things are still relatively slow before the world picks up into this next phase of what's going to be quite intense, is asking a really sincere question of what are some of the tugging feelings they've had over their lives? What have they wanted to do? What have they put off doing? What have they been inspired about in the world? And going back to that and saying, okay, what if I start to pursue some of those things? Because otherwise they're going to wake up on a daily basis and all they're going to focus on is fear. I think anybody watching this right now that is, evolved enough to be sat here around this table with us, and there might be thousands watching, it has to start with, it doesn't have to be a big purpose as in life-changing, but something that inspires them as opposed to just functioning on a daily basis. And a way to get there is to look at two things, values and beliefs. So a great process is to sit down and write down what do you value most in life and look at those things. And normally when I'm taking someone through it, we'll actually look at the hierarchy of those values, because people that are unhappy might be living like I was for years, trying to succeed, achieve in the corporate world. And I wasn't happy with that. And to the detriment of my health, relationship, divorce, and lots of other things that happened along the way. And I think anyone watching this right now, if they actually stopped and said, okay, so what do I believe more than anything else? What are my values? If happiness is a value, health is a value. In order to be happy and healthy, what do I need to do? Values can be around integrity, contribution, running a business, which has got a great sense of purpose. Because without those values, my experience is we tend to live by other people's values, what we're told by society, our parents. I think that's been happening a lot this last year. People's values have been thrown upside down. And so they're starting to live differently, and now they actually have lost their sense of identity, and without that pure identity they won't have their sense of purpose. And then the other thing is, and you talked about this earlier on, is beliefs. What do you believe in? And a great phrase that I heard years ago is, nothing has meaning apart from the meaning we give it. If you think about every moment when we perceive a situation, if we have a strong sense of our beliefs, we talked about this earlier on, then if we know what we believe in with a sense of conviction, nothing else has to have another meaning, because this is who I am and this is what I believe. Again, the problem is, we know this, we talked about Steiner earlier on, the first 5-6 years of our lives, those beliefs are moulded. COVID is like a household word to 6-year-olds now, 5-year-olds, 4-year-olds. And it's because of COVID. So they have a belief system now, they can't do this, this and this. So I think, I'm getting goosebumps talking about this, because I'm seeing a lot of people at the moment, their whole belief system is
tiny kids are putting their hands out everywhere for all the sanitizer and everything. It's just,
and this table is us, and every leg we put under it is a belief. So if somebody starts breaking those legs, the table falls over. So I think anyone watching this right now, if there was 3 things they could work on, is deciding what beliefs they want to carry forward into this new level of consciousness, what values they want to carry forward, and with that a natural sense of purpose will come, because they'll see the light from the dark.
I love that.
There would be 3 things, I think.
I love that. Thank you.
It's funny, as I'm talking to you, I'm seeing these beautiful flowers here, and sunflowers. The brightness is coming through. So
that's wonderful.
Simple,
Wonderful.
but not so simple to do, but actually in essence it works.
But within each person's power, That's what
Yeah,
I'm
because they have
hearing.
control of it.
Exactly,
That's the point.
full
I can,
control.
yeah,
Something that
exactly.
you can just do
Yeah.
today.
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
your
it's
own
practical.
home.
Yeah.
Maybe if they struggle with a meditation or a qigong
Mm.
or a stick or whatever.
Get the stick
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
No,
but
definitely.
it comes because the who am I question often comes down to what do I believe and what values do I have. I believe in happiness. I'm choosing in this moment to be happy.
Mm.
If somebody else wants to be happy, I'm happy. Ultimately, that's their choice. We can't take responsibility for that choice.
No, we can't. We can't.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Over to you, Jules, to finish
Wow.
it. First of all, we want to know how you get such amazing hair. Actually, no, I do. So whatever you're taking, I'm going to have it.
It's my own product. Let me talk to you about my product. Actually, it usually comes down to nothing, and usually it's like washed at the bare minimum, and I never use a comb, so it's like
What do I actually?
argan oil. Argan oil. That's what goes on it, and that's probably anything that keeps any control. It's uncontrollable. I can't add to what you've said. I've really enjoyed listening to the conversation here because it's been so enlightening for me. I have only got one thing to add, and that's compassion.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
There's
That's brilliant.
with what people will go through if they take this on board and they follow this path, they are going to find that compassion is the thing that doesn't alienate them from the people around them. I mean, I'm probably the worst. I am the worst for that because, God damn it, why don't you understand? I get so frustrated because I want to say to people, look, if you'd have spent the last 10 years like me reading about this, you'd have understood. I've only just mentioned this to you, so you're not going to be there. And I think what people have to understand is that the people that you speak to about this have to also follow their own path. And it's up to them to decide. It's not up to you to force them. And you have to show compassion, and you have to allow them to follow their own path. But if they choose to ask you, you have to show compassion for what they may experience, because
That's their journey.
it's their journey, and you have to show compassion, and perhaps you will be a waypoint on that journey of light.
Yeah.
But you will draw them in and allow them to find the next waypoint. So that's all I can add, is that I think just show a bit of
And
compassion.
teaching yourself, and the reflection of that compassion is being compassionate to
Towards
yourself,
Yeah.
which I think is sometimes the hardest one.
Difficult to do.
We
So true.
are such hard taskmasters.
Yeah.
So,
And
trust as well.
Yes.
yeah.
Just being able to trust that feeling. That's
Yeah.
a theme that's come out today. It's that
It
little
is.
voice.
Yeah.
Don't
Trust-
suppress it. Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
And that now is the most perfect time to make these changes. When everything is chaos around, and when the whole structure is breaking down, now is the time we need to build.
Yeah.
And you start that inside here,
Yeah.
and it's like, it's like learning to ride a bike, isn't it? It's so hard when you don't know how to ride a bike and you've got no balance, and you're being told the whole time how amazing it is when you can ride the bike, and it's so easy, and you're suddenly going to get it, and then you suddenly do get it. And it's the same thing, and I do feel that this consciousness wave that is going around the planet now is a bit like that. So we might be able to see the utopia of being on that other side, of being on your heart center, of being able to hold your sovereign breath, of having the confidence to stand solid and strong within. But until someone else actually reaches that point, they're never going to be able to see the utopia.
Yeah.
And so it comes back to your compassion again and how important
Which is
that
part
is.
of sovereignty, isn't
It
it?
is, it's part of sovereignty.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
When you are in that place, you can be nothing but compassionate. The
But
human
it's
side creeps
evolving,
in,
isn't it?
but
Is that evolving though? Because I definitely don't think I'm absolutely not there yet. I'm just setting off today on my TM journey. I'm not there, so it's sort of to say to people as well that it's not like anybody here has sussed it.
No,
It's
no,
just
no,
actually,
it's a continuum.
It's a continuum.
There's about 100 years or more of
you
learning.
never. I know.
Table.
I think that's the thing, is that I must have been in my 40s when I suddenly got the biggest revelation of my life, that it was never about the destination.
Absolutely.
And there's no
Isn't that true?
destination.
Isn't that true?
And it's just about the journey.
Isn't that
And
true?
you know,
Yeah.
and I don't know, it was so freeing. It's given me it's given me the most peaceful 50s to
Absolutely.
just let go and be in the moment and not try and, you know, control the destiny.
Yeah.
It's not to say that I'm not human, and my humanness doesn't come out many times, as people around here will attest. But it's a constant, you know, desire to be on that continuum. But I think in the closing thoughts from me.
Can I just add one thing there? So sorry, but you raised something there which I think is important. I think sovereignty, it's come up a lot today, and as you've been talking, something that's sort of resonated is, I do a lot when we're talking about communication, but Carl Jung talked about these 4 archetypes, of which one is sovereignty, or the sovereign, the other one is the warrior, I think the lover and the magician. And I think often when we're in the moment, we revert to one of them. When we want to shake somebody and go, listen to me, that might actually be the warrior that's coming out. So if anybody's struggling with this, it's to understand that we may react in one of those archetypes quite often. The magician is more creative and we come up with great ideas, and in a moment of challenge, if you can't go to sovereignty, go to another one of them and have a different perspective and say, well, what would the magician do in this moment? What would the warrior do? They'd probably go and shake somebody and say, what would the lover do? Probably be a little bit more compassionate and loving, and then go back to the sovereign and have a chat with each of those archetypes. And that conversational piece actually works really well. I found I've done that quite often when I'm getting into either I'm getting angry or frustrated or there's a conflict. I just kind of float out and go, okay, I'm in warrior mode here. Let me shift to the lover. What would I kind of imagine the lover whispering in my ear?
But that's amazing, because also the person that you're feeling that frustration with is in one of those as well, trying to bring you along to wherever they
but you're
are
just listening
too.
to that voice a bit louder than others.
I know.
No wonder there's conflict.
Yeah,
Because you're coming from 2 different places. That's so interesting.
But to bring them together, it's almost like the sovereign sits and goes, so let me have a listen to each one of those, because the warrior in us just gets stuff done, which is where your human side comes down.
I know, it's just...
I want to get results now.
Can I add one more thing though? And that's, we do all of those things that you've just said, but I think the other thing that we don't do, we listen to all these voices, but we don't actually put ourselves in the position of the person we're
if I was that person
confronting. So if I was that person and I was talking to me over there, how would I feel? And I think we very much forget we have our own position, and that's where
we want the other person to be in our position.
And actually we have to step into their shoes and see us doing whatever we're doing, so that we can take that different perspective and have that different empathy as well.
So I'm going to take all of this and I'm going to ground it, because we are still humans in physical form, back into the body again. And I'm going to thank you all for joining us. This session is entitled Feasting with Purpose, which I think we've absolutely done. We've had a purpose, we've shared that purpose. We've talked about a lot of things that don't just relate to food and nutrition and what we do with our bodies, because actually we're the sum total of all of that. But I would love people to think more about their physical bodies, because in order to be able to hold a higher resonance, to have the consciousness expansion, to follow your joy, to be in bliss, to do the things that you want to do in life, you need a body that is able to sustain that. And so, you know, thinking about what you're putting into it, the nutrients that you're putting in, the love that you put into your food when you're cooking it, and where you source your foods from as well, thinking about the environment. It's amazing that all the herbs that Melissa used in her share of the menu all came out of her garden. So no air miles. Very sustainable.
About 5 footsteps each way.
And you know, even if you've only got a grow bag on the front doorstep, it's, you know, let's start thinking in a different way about what we can actually do to nourish our bodies. And then the last thought is about your breath, and coming back to your breath, because all of this change is happening from within our bodies. And in order for us to get there, be in our bodies and influence that change, it all comes from our breath. And that's something that every single one of us does every day, and we don't have to learn it.
That's a great summary.
So thank you so much, all of you, for
Yeah.
coming and joining us, and thank you to all of you watching as well.